we're about to pull back the curtain on maybe one of the most influential people in all of history. Seriously, this is someone whose ideas are so deep in our culture, you probably bump into them like a dozen times a day and you don't even know it.
So think about it for a second. What could a huge Hollywood blockbuster, a tense presidential debate, and one of those viral ads you see everywhere possibly have in common? I mean, on the surface, they're completely different, right? One's for fun, one's for power, one's trying to sell you something. But what if I told you they all operate on you, on your brain, in the exact same way?
It's because they're all following the same ancient blueprint. Yeah, you heard me right. The basic structure, the emotional buttons they push, the very DNA of how these things are built to grab our attention and maybe even change our minds. It all comes from one single ancient source.
And that blueprint was designed by one man, Aristotle. Yep, that Aristotle, the ancient Greek philosopher guy. And it turns out he wasn't just wandering around thinking about deep stuff like ethics and politics. No, he basically wrote the original operating manual for how to tell a great story and how to persuade anyone of anything. And today, we're going to see how his code is, believe it or not, still running the world.
All right, first up, the blueprint for story. Let's dig into how Aristotle's masterpiece, a work called the Poetics, basically laid the groundwork for, well, all of modern Hollywood.
So, the core idea Aristotle had was this thing he called mimosis. Now that sounds super fancy, I know, but it's actually really simple. It just means that stories work because they're an imitation of life. They show us a version of human action that, in the end, helps us understand these big, universal truths about ourselves. It's the reason we get so much pleasure from a story, but at the same time we feel like we've learned something really deep.
And this one idea has had an absolutely incredible journey. I mean, it starts with Aristotle way back in 335 BC. Then it gets picked up and adapted by the Romans. Then it kind of gets lost for a while, but it's rediscovered during the Renaissance, and people go crazy for it. From there, you've got Shakespeare, who just perfects its principles on stage. And flash forward to today, its DNA is in pretty much every single Hollywood screenplay. It's this incredible, unbroken chain of influence stretching across thousands of years.
Okay, but here's where it gets really wild. Look at how direct the translation is from his ancient ideas to what we watch today. What Aristotle called a beginning, middle, and end, that's just Hollywood's 3-act structure. Setup, confrontation, resolution. It's the same thing. His ideas of reversal and recognition, that's the plot twist. You know, the moment in a movie that just leaves you floored? And catharsis, that big feeling of emotional release you get at the end of a powerful story? Well, that's what we call a satisfying character arc. It's a one-to-one match.
And this quote about Shakespeare just nails it. The point is, the greats weren't just following some dusty old rulebook. They were discovering these deep truths about storytelling for themselves. See, Aristotle didn't invent the rules. He was just the first person brilliant enough to analyze them and explain why they work so incredibly well.
So, okay, the guy basically shaped all of our stories, but his influence goes way, way beyond that. Let's move on to our next section, the blueprint for persuasion. This is where we see how another one of his books, the Rhetoric, provides the manual for how literally everything is sold to us.
What Aristotle did was brilliant. He broke down any attempt to persuade someone, any argument, any ad, anything, into 3 core pillars. Ethos, which is all about credibility and character, pathos, which is the appeal to emotion, and logos, the appeal to logic and reason. And trust me, once you learn to spot these 3, you will start seeing them everywhere.
All right, let's start with ethos. This is the appeal to character or credibility. Think about it. Why is a famous celebrity endorsing a product? It's because we trust them, or at least we trust their judgment or their success. We believe people we respect. That's ethos, plain and simple.
Okay, next up is pathos. This one's all about emotion. You know those charity ads that come on with the sad music and the really heart-tugging images? They're not hitting you with a bunch of facts and figures. They're trying to make you feel something. Because we are driven to act by our emotions, and boy, do advertisers and politicians know it.
And finally, we have logos, the appeal to logic. This is when they hit you with the data. 9 out of 10 dentists agree, or scientifically proven to be 50% more effective. This is the part of the argument that's aimed squarely at your rational brain. And the most powerful arguments, they almost always use a smart blend of all 3. And this is what I mean when I say his ideas are timeless. Just picture it. The great Roman orator Cicero standing in the Forum, using ethos, pathos, and logos to literally decide the fate of the Republic. Now flash forward to today. A politician is debating on TV, using the exact same tools and their little sound bites to try and win your vote. The stage is different, the technology has changed, but the fundamental technique, it hasn't changed one bit.
All right, I'm going to throw a number at you that might seem random at first, 1600. What on earth could that represent?
Well, that's how many years, over 1,600 years, that religious leaders have been consciously using Aristotle's rhetorical tools. It was a hugely important theologian named Augustine who basically argued, hey, these tools of persuasion that the pagan speakers are using, we should be using them to teach, to delight, and to move people towards faith. He essentially baptized Aristotle's ideas, and that created a tradition of powerful preaching that is still very much alive today.
Okay, so we've seen his blueprint for epic stories and his blueprint for persuasion. For our final section, we're diving into the lost blueprint and his living legacy. And this one starts with a fantastic mystery. We've talked about tragedy, for serious stuff, and for persuasion. But what about the stories that make us laugh? What about comedy? I mean, what did this incredible analyst of the human condition have to say about what makes us laugh?
Get this. He wrote a whole other book on it, a second part of the Poetics, focused entirely, 100% on comedy. And it's gone. It vanished. Historians consider it one of the greatest, most tragic lost works of all ancient literature.
Now, from the few clues he left behind in his other writings, scholars think it probably defined comedy as imitating people who are ridiculous, flawed and funny, but not actually evil. It likely even talked about a comic catharsis, the idea that laughter itself is a kind of purifying, cleansing experience. And because it's lost, there's just this huge gap in the history of how we think about stories.
And this mystery of the lost book is so famous, it actually became the central plot of Umberto Eco's amazing novel, The Name of the Rose. In the story, a monk poisons the very last copy of the manuscript because he believes that laughter is dangerous, that it undermines the fear of God.
And Eco's point is so powerful. He's saying that the suppression of comedy is really the suppression of a whole dimension of truth. Laughter isn't just silly. It's a vital part of what makes us human. And that's something Aristotle, thousands of years ago, obviously understood.
So when you really step back and look at it, his influence is just staggering. From the basic structure of our favorite movies to the ads that pop up on our phones, we are living in a world that was, in so many ways, built on Aristotle's ideas. He is like the invisible architect of so much of our modern culture.
Look, his blueprints shape our world. But they aren't just some dusty academic thing. They are active, powerful tools being used all around you and on you every single day. So now that you can see them, now that you know the code, what are you going to build?